Hi, my name is Stephen Pring, and I'm having an art show at Gallery Route 1 in Point Reyes. The title of the show is New Colors, and there's a lot of experimentation with colors and putting them on the panels to make beautiful paintings. I've been painting about 20, 30 years, and I'd like you to come to see the show. I made a couple of small paintings, 6 by 6 inches, and then I wanted to make something larger out of it and put them all together. I've always wondered how to display them, and then I said, oh, I can just put them on a panel, make a grid, as opposed to individually on a shelf or some other system, and then I could put them together in sort of an arbitrary manner and it also sort of covers the process in itself. The ultimate goal is to cover the painting with dots, but it starts out with spraying the surface first and getting images and shadows of different objects that I place in front of the panel. Once it's been sprayed, it has its own image, but to take it further, I start emphasizing different things that come to mind when I look at the panel that's been sprayed, and continue processing by using dots, and then creating another image that has been suggested by the process of spraying onto the panel. And that brings out through, I think, some psychological expression that, since I do use some natural objects like twigs and ferns to spray over, that suggest nature in general. And then within that system of nature in general, figures start to appear. And then by the process, it emphasizes the interaction, again, between humanity and nature, creating something beautiful to look at, if not confusing, and yet transformative. Dots, I had always for a long time used dots in drawings I had done earlier on a Sharpie. So it'd be a drawing with lots of dots. And so the process I realized was pretty important to me early on. And I thought I would start to introduce it into the paintings and sprayed images. And it brought sort of the past and the present together to create a painting, and it seems to be extremely satisfying to unify the process of painting in that way. And the paintings do kind of look back at you. It's part of the process. You're looking at it, and it's looking at you. And you make it like you want it to be sort of a mirror. That one teacher once told me make yourself a mirror, and then so you want to be able to see yourself in it, and others can also see themselves in it when they see and look at the painting. Yeah, we put long ago I have done some sort of collage imagery. Then it suggests more, something a little more realistic as opposed to fantasy-like. So you're sort of incorporating a realistic image that we're sort of very familiar with a more fantasy image. And the worlds sort of come together. And the same with the different images. It shows the whole process. By the plain ones is how the painting begins before I start applying the dots. And there's a certain amount of, once I apply the collage, I put some paint on the board, press the newsprint or magazine page onto the paint, and once the magazine page is removed, it you don't know what it's going to be. It's more like randomness, and it goes back to chance and what was talked about with John Cage or things like that. And so it gives us a glimpse of something we're not expecting to see. And there's an amount of discovery and surprise when that happens. It just sort of makes it very interesting to me. Actually inspired sort of by Gordon Onslow Ford. I had seen a show long ago at the Oakland Museum and was really inspired by the work. And so I thought I would pay some tribute and homage to him by doing this. Yeah, the show was very inspiring. It was just graduated from college. I really like the way these look. It's sort of a grid, and again, it's sort of in an attempt to make a straight line over and over again, but it doesn't happen that way. So that's the human element entering the idea of the dots with trying to do something and then, in essence, failing at it, but having it succeed. The dots come back to when I was in school, and a teacher, William Wiley, used this sort of image of a black and white. This goes back to the I Ching and yin and yang. Well, a lot of things from the garden. So you can see there's leaves and just weeds that you pull up and lay down. Spray over them and you get this surprise shapes. The leaves are not surprised. The ferns, you know what they're going to look like. I also use tools. I'm a carpenter, so I've been using these washers. It gets the round eye type look. And other things, I'm experimenting more with just spraying over rocks and stuff. But yeah, you can just pull up a weed or grass. It's not a weed, but it creates an image that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do it intentionally. Okay, those blobs. That's like Scott towel or tissue. Usually Scott towel, and I use the number 10 finish nail to make the dots. So you have to clean the nail, and so the different colors that were used on the nail end up making those dots on Scott towel. Then I put the paint on the panel again and place the Scott towel over that paint, and it creates a surprise color and image. I actually like it quite a bit. It's, again, random, a little arbitrary. You can find some beauty in things that you're not expecting to. the fish image does come through once you, after the spray paint. And I used to do a lot of fishes here at Gallery Route 1. And that one started out by spraying over some electrical wire to get that spiraling shape. So again, it's sort of some building materials enter into it, since that's part of my background as a carpenter. Right, so these are smaller paintings than the other sizes. Are like about 12 by 10. And it focuses. I saw a show by Raphael Ferrer who did masks on paper bags, and repeating that same size is really intriguing, and seeing how many different things you can do as you go from one panel to the next. And the scale, it's more intimate, of course, and to the point, but there's something nice about small too. No, well, this is like an earlier one in this series, which is how they were a little more straightforward and not as complicated, with less detail. So that's pretty interesting that way to look back. And then even the images, even though it's about dots, there's a sort of a strong abstract element to this painting. Some detail. And this was the first grid that I put together that I thought it really worked for me. So just how they were all interrelated yet different. Anyway, I hope you can come to the gallery and see these works in person and enjoy them as much as I do. Thank you, and thank Gallery Route 1.
Hi, my name is Stephen Hurwitz. My show is called The Studio Road Trip, and it's going to be showing through the month of September. I want to talk a little bit about my work and maybe show you what I have going on here in the annex. I've been into stripes for a long time, and I like painted stripes, and I like the relationship between the colors. It's really about color for me. It's about, these things are about texture, and they're about color, and they're about order, I would say, is probably a big thing that's happening here. They're really, the pieces in the show and this, they're really like puzzles, to be honest with you. They are painted on plywood, and each color is a specific, a unique strip of plywood. I use plywood for several reasons. Number one, you get a really nice texture on it. So it gives it a very soft feeling to it. And I like the absorbency of the plywood. And I like the fact that it's a mundane material. It's just a real everyday, there's nothing really precious about plywood, and I like that about it. Why don't we go into the annex, and we can talk a little bit about what I'm up to. You can take a look at some of the stuff that's in the show. Again, I just like to express that these are puzzles that I've put together, and most of these smaller pieces are pieces that were left over from my process in making the larger pieces. When I'm working out color, I use pieces of plywood and I mess around with the colors and see how they work together. And I just have hundreds of little colored pieces that that I've used, testing colors, etc. And so I had these boxes of them. I said, okay, how can I put these things together so that they make sense? It's another puzzle for me. And what you're going to see here is a series of pieces really put together with found material in a sense, but it was found in my studio. You get an idea what this is. Probably one of the things that I like to think of the most is that it's about play. I can't say I'm always playing in there, that's obvious, but I try and open myself up. I try and just play around, throw stuff around, put stuff together, see how it looks, take it apart, put it back together again. And when I like what I have, then I'll glue it up, and you'll see what I have as a finished piece. And I'm playing around with technique, with color. You know, that piece is interesting because it maybe didn't work out as nice as I want, but the background is black acrylic, but the pieces on it are a completely different color black. And it's a special black that I got from a guy in England, and he has this little thing going with Anish Kapoor, where Anish has, I don't know if you know him, but an incredible artist. He has patented his own black, the darkest black, and they've got this little thing going between the two of them as to who gets to make the darkest black. It's an interesting story. Probably can find it on the internet. You know, the one thing else I'd like to talk about this show is this, in terms of my process, there is a difference between what your intentions are and what you end up. And I found that for me, I can start out with an idea, and then I have to let the materials and the process take over. And this is a perfect example, this stripe piece. Very bright colors. That's where I wanted to start. I said, I want to get it. My former pieces were in the grayish side, and they were really my COVID pieces. And I wanted to break out of that, and I started doing these bright colors that you see, and I couldn't sustain it. You have to use colors, and they have to resonate. They have to feel right. And for me, I just can't decide ahead of time how I'm going to use the colors. They take on a life of their own. And so, interestingly, I want to do color, and I'm stuck here with a lot of black and dark pieces, and that just happened on its own, and I'm comfortable with it. But it's funny how it's an agreement, in a sense, between my process and what the spirits grant me, so to speak. I'm not sure I have much more to add than that, but it's been a lot of fun putting this together. I've been working on it for quite a bit of time, and sometimes it's just you know, here's another thing about it. Some of the best pieces fall into place the easiest. The best pieces you don't have to struggle with at all. And I think that she's coming up to a piece that fits into that category. And it's the next piece after that, one of these stacking pieces. This is the piece I want to refer to in that way. This piece, I think, is probably one of the best pieces in the show. And it's called Let's Not Be Ourselves Today. Oh, that's another thing. I'll talk about my titles. Let's Not Be Ourselves Today. And it just all fell into place. 1, 2, 3. I titled some of these pieces based on the music I was listening to while I was making this. And David Byrne with the Talking Heads, who's has very intelligent lyrics. I picked up some titles. I mean, what do you do with an abstract painting? Where do you get a title? I don't want to use a title that describes it. If you do that, then it's no longer abstract. You've linked it to something. But I linked them to music I was listening to, so you can thank David Byrne for this at the Talking Heads. Thank you for joining me for this little video tour. I'm glad that you got a chance to look at it this way, and I sincerely hope that you come and join us here and check it out in real life. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jenny Lynn Hall with Z Hurwitz. I'm one of the co-directors of our Visiting Artist Program here at Gallery Route 1. We show artists that are not members here in our project space, which is one of our first nonprofit ventures. It was founded to show specifically artists that were focusing on environmental art after the Exxon Valdez oil spill. There was such an outcry from a lot of the members to just bring environmental issues to the forefront, and that tradition continues today. Right now, we're really thrilled to produce the Terra Art Collective, a group of 4 women who are eco-artists who are showing here. They'll all talk about how they got together and individually about their pieces. But it's been a real pleasure working with this group. Their commitment to their craft is extraordinary. 2 of them were here for days doing very intricate installations, which I think give a lot of richness to the show and to the space. The other 2 encaustic artists are just top-notch. So without further ado, here they are, the Terra Art Collective: Leah J., Deborah Kennedy, Michele Guieu, and Shannon Amidon, who will be represented by me talking about reading her statement.
Hi, we're all members of the Terra Art Collective, and we got together several years ago. My brother said to me, "Find your people." And I said, I was in a show and they were all women eco-artists. I found my people, and it's been a great source of support during the pandemic years.
Yes, that was a very specific and special time, as you know, this COVID thing, and we got together online mostly after the show we had together, and it was very important to be able to talk about our projects, and specifically this project in this gallery, and sustain our inspiration.
Right. And I've been really inspired by these 2 and by Shannon Amidon also and just as I was shifting my art practice to be more focused with more purpose in the eco art realm after 2018, 2019, something like that, this gang came along at just the right time for me to, get inspired, work with them, and meet. And yeah, it's been really great.
I moved to the Bay Area 12 years ago, and one of the first things I did was to join a gallery there that is Collide, where I met Leah and Shannon Amidon, and we were exhibiting there regularly. It was a very, very nice community gallery in San Jose, really a hub point for all sorts of artists who are really eager to meet and do stuff together. So that was really awesome. Then, just before the pandemic hit, Shannon decided, it was a project of hers before the pandemic, to move, and she moved to Portland with her family. And the same year, or a few months after, Leah moved too. So
I also moved to Portland because it seemed to be the thing to do in town. And we were all in the same town or Bay Area, and then we split off, and somehow we're managing to stay together even though we're interstate now.
So Shannon was a very well-known artist in San Jose and around, and she had many shows. She's a curator too, and she organized a show at Art Gallery in San Jose, Biophilia. That was really beautiful. So we did a lot of things together.
Hi, I'm Leah J. I'm a watercolorist primarily, and work with lots of other media. I lived in the Bay Area for 25 years and then moved to Portland fairly recently, a year and a half ago. And this is my work. So this first one is some fireflies. It's the only one that doesn't have just watercolor in it. It's actually got gold leaf and a green glaze over that. But this is your entry into the mystical realm that is my show. spirits of nature. And you'll notice that I have white outlines on my creatures. I wanted to draw attention to their ephemeral nature, as well as that their spirits, it's sad in a way, but I'm trying to honor what we're losing and what has been lost already. And even things common like crows and coyotes, we'd miss them if they didn't run around and shriek in our forests. So even an old tree stump can have a almost holy shrine-like feeling, to me anyway. A lot of the themes I like are just getting up close and personal with the moment and with that creature, with its spirit. And that's actually from a photograph of a salamander I was holding in my hand. And so that is a personal moment for me. And mushrooms also. I'm very into fungi, and the people is showing to me the relationship of humanity to the world. We're part of it and we're in it, and I think the mushrooms feel more important to me. I've been a poet for several years, and I'm starting to get bold enough to share it. So a lot of the poems in the show relate directly to the art that I've created. These snail spirits are, as you can see, they're godlike in stature compared to the people. The snails are a symbol of the degrowth movement, so I kind of glommed onto them. I like drawing them too. They're just really interesting, you know, the spiral form and all. But to slow down and to think about, to feel how it would be, you know, to move so slowly, and to emulate that in our lives and in our the way we live and work and spend money, or don't. I did a special project several years ago. It was a book called Amphibian Love, and it was to benefit the Save the Frogs, SaveTheFrogs.org, plug. But the frogs are in the world are just so delicate and disappearing fast, and there's so many of them that are gone now. So it's honoring their loss. Here's my salamander again, and I took a picture of these 113-ish mushrooms on my property in Portland. I moved north out of it was a climate change motivated move. But there's water there still, and so many beautiful things still to be preserved and cherished. Here are some tule elk. Actually, the children are sort of large in relationship to them, but I was more getting toward a feeling of aspiration and hope. Every once in a while, I like to get a little bit hopeful, get a little cheered up. A little bit about process. I use watercolor and lots of it, and then I impress upon it with various items, but mostly plastic, and of course recycled plastic, that I leave in the puddles of watercolor. And then let dry, stretch, and paint over with gouache or opaque watercolor to get that outline. And yeah. So my pieces have been sealed with cold wax instead of varnish. And they've been adhered to boards. I'm trying to get as close to no plastic as possible, at least in this series. And I know it's very difficult to do. A lot of texture in this one, as you can see from the plastic. And again, this is sort of like my shrine to the world of fungi. This piece is on a candy box, a recycled candy box. It's the only one like it. So, and this one is, I like to paint and relate to creatures that are on my property. This is a coyote fellow. He has extra legs showing his running motion, emphasizing that. But common though he is, I am glad to have him. Glad to have him around. Now, this one relates to a memory I had growing up. I spent lots of time in the Santa Cruz Mountains because we moved up to kind of the middle of nowhere in the Santa Cruz Mountains when I was a teenager, and we had a pond and it got filled, and then all of a sudden frogs appeared and it was a mystery to us. So I'm kind of remembering that mystery. And here are a couple of Thule elk. This is one of the first ones I did for the show. I was inspired by the place because I heard, oh, we're going to Point Reyes. I had never been. And I recently saw my first Thule elk in the wild, and it was exciting. The flame is something that comes up for me in my work. It is a process of consumption and moving and ephemeral, showing what we're losing. And the bishop pines too are my ode to this place. Last but not least, we have the snakes that I found on my property. They weren't making this shape, of course, but this is from photography right out my back door. We have a lot of little northwestern garter snakes, and most people go, ooh, snakes, and I'm the person who runs toward them and goes, oh, look, goody, what a wonderful creature. And I love them so much. And the buds of spring and around, so about when I found them. They were just emerging, those buds. So. Thanks for checking out my work. I hope you can see it in person. And if not, you can check out my website. After the show, I will talk about my work there, and my poetry's there, leahjr.com. And I hope that from my show you get the feeling of intimacy and interconnectedness with nature. It's not separate from us, we're part of it. I want you to feel like you're in it when I create my work. So, thanks.
Hello, I am Michele Guieu. I'm an eco artist, and I moved to the United States 20 years ago and to the Bay Area 12 years ago. I'm an educator too, and I teach in East San Jose in underserved communities. I did that for years with Montalvo Art Center, and I continue to do it with Alliance for Youth Achievement, a foundation that is in San Jose. I'm here for this exhibition today, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to have this wall here to work on it. And I installed for a few days this installation that is named Down to Earth. So I will give a little explanation about what it is and what it means for me. So this is Down to Earth. This year, 2022, is the 50th anniversary of Limits to Growth. It's a book, a study that was published in 1972 by scientists at the MIT. And the idea, so you see this tag here in the middle represents this book here. And the interesting thing with this study that is 50 years old is that it shows the possibility, it's a study made on a computer at MIT. So limits to growth here is the tag that talks about the book. And the book is specifically a study about the limits we have on Earth with our civilization regarding the possibility of growth. And the study shows, and there are variables like population and resources and energy, and the study shows that whatever pretty much happens, we are bound to have a collapse of the civilization, the thermo-industrial civilization, somewhere before the end of this century. And what is amazing about this study is that to the date, today, it holds, which is very rare. It's been 50 years, and really what they found was quite impressive. The problem is that they were not really listened to, and we are now in complete overshoot, and so we have consequences to this enormous use of resources and energy. So one thing that I have learned a few years ago is that energy is at the center of everything. And this is something that we don't necessarily talk about. And I love the way a professor that I follow his work, Nate Higgins, he's a professor at the University of Minnesota. He talks about something called energy blind. And he says we are energy blind. We do not know how much energy we use. So what this shows here is the complexity of the system really we put together. This civilization is based on the use of an enormous amount of energy, an enormous amount of fossil fuel, and an enormous amount of resources that is the extraction system we have. Basically, what is mind-boggling is that, yes, what we have is amazing. It's complex, it's growing exponentially, so this is something also very important, but it cannot continue this way. And this is on my mind a lot, so this installation is an attempt to really show a little bit what's on my mind, an artist representation of this complexity and the fact that we absolutely need to sift through this information to realize how difficult things are and to get out of this idea of, for example, techno-solutionism, which is something we hear a lot, and especially when you live in the Bay Area, people are like, no worries, we are going to find solutions, right? So the idea is that it is so complex that things have to be envisioned in their complexity, not in silos. So that's my take on it. And I thought about it for a long time, and I'm very happy actually to show this installation here for the first time at Gallery Route 1, because it was on my mind during the whole COVID. And I was like, okay, I want to do something about this, even if it's difficult, even if maybe people will not get exactly what I want to say, but this is some sort of reality. It's a mess. It is. And we have, at the same time, and to think about this, the belief systems, because this, with energy and with the resources, is the key. It's like, if we want to get out of this, we need to change this. Because this is not just changing all the energy we use with renewables. No, we need to use less energy, but for that, we need to let some things go, right? And one interesting thing is that, and I realize that, I'm 60 years old, you would think I realized that before, but it is through this type of studies, and I read Limits to Growth not 50 years ago, not so long ago, the work of Nate Higgins, the work of many other people. I work with the Millennium Alliance for Humanity and the Biosphere at Stanford. People are thinking about this for so long. Now this society is going to collapse. How can we prevent it? What can we do? And the interesting thing is that there are no solutions. Climate change, so all what we see now, due to this use of fossil fuel, the consequences, climate change is a consequence of the system. It's not a problem per se, it's like a consequence. So we have to do something about it, but we cannot solve it. And that is also something I would love to for example, to teach the kids, right? We need to teach the kids this. It's very important. Things are not, oh, if we do this and that, boom, it will be solved. No, it's much more complicated than this. So these are consequences of this. It's like the extractive economy. You would think, I mean, things are not limitless. I think it's obvious, but in fact, a lot of people don't necessarily think about this, right? I love this one. GDP is the measure of our destruction of nature. So there you go. When you think about a table that is sold at IKEA, it enters the GDP, right? So the wood that was taken is not taken in the equation, but the table is worth $20. There you go. It's in the GDP. But the tree that is growing in a park or in a forest is not taken into the GDP. It is not. And it's mind-boggling to realize how the system we created is completely disjointed from nature. So this is so much, I mean, it's in my mind. It's a little bit crazy the way it is done. In my mind, it's also complicated. I try to put things together, right? And then when you have all this, and I think we need to go through this, we need to understand that green finance and green growth and all the green things are a deviation or a distraction. It is made by a system that wants to continue. So we need to go beyond this, right? So how do we take all this to slowly, no, rapidly transfer to this here? So this adaptation, and I'm not even talking about transition, it's like we need to adapt because yes, the things are what they are. So how can we still have meaning and thrive and continue, have a chance to be here in a few decades, and for everyone, this process should be equitable, which we are far from it, of course. There is a huge problem of the global north extracting everything from the global south. So you can see through what I say that I'm very passionate about it. This is something that sometimes keeps me up at night. I think, like I said, there are responses, and many people are working on responses. So this is great. This is beautiful. I think people have a lot to say, and in that way, I have hope. Right? But it is an informed hope. And that's why I love to work with the Millennium Alliance for Humanity and the Biosphere at Stanford, because here they are scientists and people from all around the world working together to think and say, okay, how can we avoid the worst? Because the best is possible, and that is the beauty of it. Either it's a collapse by design, or it's a collapse that we have no choice about, and this is not a good collapse at all. So it's not collapse, it's degrowth in that case, I would say. So that could be a degrowth by design. We decide to let go things. So to say that this installation, what I want to say is that yes, the part here, the red part, is hard to process. And it is difficult, but I wanted in the end, and that's my work. I work like this. In my process, I try to work with themes that are difficult. That's what I do. But in the end, I hope people get joy from my installation, because I did it with I was happy to do it. I'm happy to do it because I think I can share something with people. They will be attracted to it. And then maybe they will read something and they will be like, oh, wow, this is terrible. Yes, but there is also things that are beautiful. So that's the way I try to think. I try not to be dark in what I show, and that's true for all my installations. My work is usually very, I would say, dynamic in this way. So maybe I can share a little bit about the process, about the materials, why I did this here. So what I try to do is to take a minimum of materials. So for example, a large wall like this, everything almost goes in a box, right? So it's a yarn that I found we have in San Jose, a place where we find discarded material, and it's very nice. When I have a project, I go there and I see what I find. So there I find this wood. So this is a discarded pieces of wood that I'm using. The yarn is from there, and of course they sell it. I love this because it's material that they sell to teachers, artists, anybody really who wants to make projects. And then there is industrial thread on this side. Industrial thread here. And some driftwood here, some pieces of driftwood with tags. And you see the tags are made with discarded, I mean, it's recycled boxes, packaging here. So the driftwood from Santa Cruz, from the shore, and yeah. So that's the idea, is like, it can be very, very large, but in the end, it's not much material. And that is very important in the work I do, because it goes with what I'm talking about here. This installation is participatory. I do a lot of participatory installations. I really let the public share their thoughts. So for this installation here, on the little pieces of driftwood on the wall, people can take a tag in this box here, pick the size, and write their thought on the tag, and then place the tag here on one of the driftwood. So the driftwood is peppered through the installation in this part here that is more, I would say, the responses, the positive part, the what can we do and how are we going to go from here, or share an idea about this system here, the ensemble of the situation, right? The multi-crisis we have. And I hope people are going to share as many thoughts as possible. They can also draw. It's really up to them. It can be anything really, symbols. So, and after that, people who come to see the installation can check the tags and see what is written.
Hi, I'm Deborah Kennedy. I'm part of the Terra Art Collective, and I'm here to introduce my work at Gallery Route 1. And this piece is entitled Sanctuary. I've been working as an eco-artist for many, many years, and I'm a conceptually based artist. Most artists, if you ask them what type of art do you make, they'll say something like oil painting. That's your material and methods. For me, art is a state of inquiry. So each piece, I have different questions, I do research. My materials and methods and imagery arise out of that research. And for this one, I realized I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to create a sanctuary. And this is my eco-sanctuary, and I'm inviting people to come and think about our accelerating environmental crisis and imagine ways that we can find pathways to healing our troubled relationship with the natural world. The center of my sanctuary is what I'm calling the voice of the forest. These pieces of wood, I went up into the mountains after a terrible wildfire that burned almost 90,000 acres and over 900 homes. And these are remnants of the trees that were left after this wildfire. And I kind of see them as a family group. Above them is a solar symbol, but it is also a symbol that is really kind of like my spiritual symbol. And it came from Professor W.D. Billings. And he developed this holocoenotic theory of environmental complexity. And he was trying to show us the web of life and how to have a living environment, you have to have all the parts connected, supporting each other. All the parts of an ecosystem are interdependent. And as that ecosystem becomes more frayed, more parts will start to disintegrate. So that's the voice of the forest. And then I kind of have my halo here. That's hopefully the voice of the forest echoing out to us. We know now that we survive as civilizations when our forests survive. And obviously our forests are not doing well now. Now I'd like to introduce the Library of Life. These are altered books that I'm creating that are here around the centerpiece here. And right in the middle is my memorial field guide to the birds. So this surface of the book has been covered with pigment and also bird feathers. And then I've created a little nest here, but it's made from technological materials. The birds, they say we've lost 3 billion birds since 1970, but isn't that kind of not telling the story? The real story is we've annihilated 3 billion birds. All these stories, though, have a dark side and a positive side. The positive side of the bird story is that the wetland birds are the only group that have surged back. And why is that? Because we are protecting the wetlands. Few people realize that duck hunters and other hunters pay an extraordinary amount of money that goes to supporting restoring wetlands and other natural areas. And that's really helped the wetland birds. So all of these stories, this one is a threatened frog. This is an anatomically correct model of a threatened frog here in California, and nestled down, camouflaged into its environment there. Frogs were the first species that really had a global collapse. And that's a very concerning event that's happening there. But we're seeing these kind of declines in so many different species. But again, if we did what we're doing with the wetlands and started to protect the frogs and to create an environment that was no longer full of toxic chemicals, they could begin to come. Life has such vigor, such power. We've seen this over and over. When we've protected fisheries, suddenly there's more fish than the fishermen know what to do with. And so they start to develop and come out of the protected marine environments. And it's a win-win for us as a species and them as a species. This one is showing my little bees. I did my first bee project in 1999. We were just starting to hear about colony collapse disorder. And these little bees, one of them can move a little bit here. They're on a field of grass. And we are so dependent on bees. We will miss them if we totally destroy them. In my area, the West Nile fever started to emerge, and they sprayed the entire city with pesticides. My backyard used to be full of native bees, butterflies, honeybees, and suddenly no more. So we may think that we're making ourselves safer by killing insects, but Germany did a study. They found 75% of their insects are gone. We need insects. They feed birds. They're an integral part of that web of life. So we really need to start thinking about what we're doing in this area. In the middle here is my water book. And this has the symbol in the center that Professor Billings actually drew. He gave me permission to use his drawing. And it's a beautiful depiction of the web of life. And water, of course, links all the life on our planet. And we have a water crisis. We have a water crisis because our water is increasingly contaminated with plastics and other toxics. And because of climate change, we're getting into a situation where it's either feast or famine. We have too much rain and terrible flooding, or we have terrible droughts. So we didn't realize how gentle and how supportive the natural world was until we started to tear apart this web of life and our climate system. And unfortunately, we are seeing the consequences of that. So part of what I'm inviting people to come and do here is to contemplate, to think, to try and figure out what each of us can do to start moving us toward a pathway toward a thriving world. I have a number of radiant hearts in my installation, and for me, they're glowing. I use copper. I've used copper over and over in my work, and one of the reasons is that copper is a vital metal that every single living creature and plant needs to have in its system to remain healthy. So for me, it's a symbol of that vitality of life. And so this radiant heart, this is actually my hair that I discovered I'd been carrying around from when I was 14 years old. So this book is covered with human hair, and it has this radiant heart. Can we find the love and caring for our world to begin to make the efforts to change and create this thriving world? We're at a very exciting time. We just got a bill through, thank goodness, that has been blocked. This type of effort has been blocked for so many years. And now we have, they call it the Inflation Reduction Act, but really it has a lot of climate change policy in it. And if we don't continue to build on that and keep turning toward our efforts toward creating a thriving world, we're all going to suffer for it, not just the animals and creatures around us. This book has a model of a human egg and the end of a fallopian tube as it's entering in. So all of us have made this journey to be here. And this book has animal hair on the surface of it. And both the animals and we humans are suffering a lot of damage to our genetic materials. You'd think that we would want to preserve and protect the diversity and health of our genetic materials. But I think few people today are unaware how our children are suffering neurological problems, increasing asthma, and so many diseases that are in part due to our indiscriminate use of chemicals that are so dangerous to both ourselves and the larger natural world. We're seeing so many animals becoming hermaphroditic. So that means they have both the characteristics of female and male creatures. The chemicals we're using are something called hormone disruptors. Hormone disruptors are breaking down this extremely intricate and fragile system of hormone communication that makes me a woman and makes my husband a man. These chemicals are extremely important at the beginning of life. It's a cascade of hormonal signals that creates the development of either a male or female, and also critical to the development of neurological systems in our children. So this is something that we have pretty much ignored as societies. Europe has made a few gestures toward changing this, but not nearly sufficient. So this is an area that, as a mom, I'm terribly concerned about. And we could do so much better with the slightest bit of effort.
Hi, this is Jenny Lynn Hall again, and I am going to read you Shannon Amidon's bio and statement. She couldn't join us today, but will be here for the closing of this wonderful exhibit. Residing in the Pacific Northwest, Shannon Amidon is an artist, beekeeper, environmental steward, wonder seeker, lover of insects, books, and plants. Shannon has been featured in solo and group exhibitions worldwide, curated group exhibits, garnered press, and participated in artist residencies all over the world, focusing on both art making and ecological research. She has collaborated with many other artists, scientists, activists, and researchers. Her statement is as follows. As an encaustic artist, I am keenly attuned to the bond between art and nature. Honeybees produce the wax I use for my encaustic paint, but there are other reasons that I explore natural history and environmental issues through my artwork. My formative years involved a substantial amount of time surrounded by and exploring nature. These childhood roots in the natural world stimulated my personal, political, and aesthetic concern with our current ecological challenges. Concerned about all aspects of the environment, I find myself responding with increasing alarm to intensive farming and urbanization, pesticide use, introduced species, and other triggers of climate change. Consequently, my artwork places a particular focus on the decline of pollinators and other insects due to the loss and destruction of their habitats. Insects serve very important roles to humans in our environment, supporting the food web, pollinating plants, disposing of waste, and cycling nutrients. I use my curiosity about these ecological interconnections to create paintings and installations that draw attention to our environmental crises. Through images of bees, honeycombs, dragonflies, moths, and other flora and fauna, I put my encaustic materials to emphatic use. These pieces not only portray a threatened world, but they also call attention to the fact that the very medium of encaustic cannot exist without the survival of bees. By portraying the cycles of life, death, and impermanence in my work, I hope to raise awareness about environmental issues, inviting my audience to see nature, not as a backdrop, but as a vital element of our existence.